So what we're starting to see now is that when you have the defender pinned against the side of the board in a close defense, often the quickest route to victory is to transform it into a distant defense, force the defender to send the rook to the other edge of the board. There are some specific techniques for how to handle such positions. You've seen some of them in the video on the javelin position. Generally, okay, we got the king trying to skitter away, preventing the mate on c8. Give a check here, and it's better for the defender to block with the rook. I'll quickly show you what happens if he comes up here. Well, the king is attacking the rook. He can't get away from the rook, so check there, there, check there, there, and you've got a skewer of the rook. So he blocks, and now simply cover the second rank. The rook can no longer cut off the queen because both the king and queen are covering e7. So now's the time to adopt a distant defense. I'm going to call this the absolute seventh, when the rook cannot be used to interrupt the seventh rank or the second row from the edge of the board if you're somewhere else. This is one of the times when the defender does best to adopt a distant defense. Distant defenses are hardest to break down when the king and the rook are both on center file or row squares. So if we shifted this position 2 rows to the left or 2 rows to the right and flip the king and queen to the other side, it would be a lot easier to break down. There are specific techniques to use here. First, we're setting up the diagonal position. There's a reason for this. If he goes there, it's actually not a very good defense anymore, because when the two defending pieces are on the center files, then the attacker has the option of checking over here, checking there, and we've got the skewer. So far better to go there, maintaining a distant defense, and now the attacker has to know the general pattern for how you break this down. It's similar to what we do in the javelin defense, or the javelin position. Walk the king forward with discovered check. He's obviously not going to go to e8. Now, start giving checks to the king. We're on the diagonal next to the diagonal of the rook. He can't go to the A file because then queen A4 check picks up the rook. Now he can't even go to the B file because queen B3 picks up the rook. So we've forced him into a fatal fork. Now, what if he goes there? The answer is, this is a position to know and remember. Queen b3, the triple threat. Notice that there's an immediate threat of mate on b8. Notice that the rook is attacked. And the third of the triple threats is a mate threat on g8 that isn't quite on the board yet. At this point, with so many threats on the board, black's only option is to give one check. But when the king walks over here, now the queen is threatening mate on both sides of the king. The rook cannot block both. So the only thing that the defender can do is walk the king over here and fall into a fork, or give a check from d1 and lose the rook immediately. So remember the triple threat position, this position. Once you give check to the king on c7 and he walks to d8, quiet move ends the game. We'll see the triple threat position evolving again here. So king d8, give check from the diagonal next to the diagonal of the rook. If he drops to e8, that's an immediate mate. Give check from this square. If he goes to the b file, queen b3 picks up the rook, and if he goes there, we have the triple threat position on the board. Now here's what makes the absolute 7th position fun. This defense. Black can try to stay in a close defense, but white simply corners the king by adopting a knight move away from the king. Pretty much the safest move here is to go there, and now, well, black is pretty much trapped. He's got to go to a distant defense, and we start using procedures that you already know. By going there, the queen takes up control of the checking square. If the defender checks there, now there's no more checks. Quick pickup of the rook. If he goes there, maintaining the distant defense, the king can still walk in safely. Note that there's a mate threat on the board on a8. Check there, and you see it coming, triple threat. So in general, against distant defenses, white uses 4 tactics. Discovered check threats, giving check from the diagonal next to the diagonal of the rook, the triple threat position, and when all else fails, control the rook's checking square to allow the king to advance one more rank or file toward the opposing king. Let's see that all one more time, only let's put white on the move in this position. The thing to do is trap the opposing king, queen b7. If black adopts the distant defense, you've seen it all before. Give a check here. We're working our way toward the diagonal next to the diagonal of the rook. Give a check here. The black king has to avoid the b file because of queen b4 check. Same thing. Triple threat position has emerged. If we move the position one more file to the left or any distance to the right, same plan still works. Trap the king, distant defense, check there, check there, check there. And he either goes to the b file and loses the rook on b3, or he goes to d8 and you create the triple threat. And finally, now white can't go to the left, a knight move away, but with the defending pieces pinched so far into the corner, there's no need. You use positions you've already seen before. Simply pass by going there. The rook doesn't have a whole lot of safe squares anywhere. So this is actually the toughest defense. Neither of the rook's checks, rook's diagonals lends itself to giving check from the neighboring diagonal. By putting the rook on a black square, well, the king's on a black square, and it's kind of hard to give check on the diagonal from a light square to a black square. So, simply set up the discovered check. The only time the defender can safely ignore the discovered check threat is if the rook's already on g7, when he'd move the king to a7. So he has to return the rook. There's the diagonal position. You know how to win the diagonal position. There are some different ways to create the absolute 7th ideas. For example, from this position with white to move, give a check here, attacking both king and rook, forces this response and fall over there. We have an absolute 7th because the king is controlling this square. The rook can no longer interrupt the 7th rank. Or if you're in this position, spear the rook, falls back, bingo, absolute 7th. Even if the attacking king starts a long way away, many of the same themes show up. Spear the rook, force the king to stay close, walk the king forward, This is one of the good things to do with the rook. Have it hide in the shadow of the attacking king. But I get a free move forward that way. He gives a check, bring the king there, and now the queen is controlling the checking square. So there's no further checks. What are you going to do with the rook? If the rook comes back to b7, it's an immediate mate on a8. So, and if you try to walk out, give a check there, and the control of these two checking squares and the fact that this square is off limits means he's got to move to a square where there's a fork. And now a couple of notes on what is not the absolute seventh. This is not an absolute seventh position. This is a trivial win for white. Even if black is on the move, there's just no way to escape because of the mate threats here and here. The kings are in opposition. That's not an absolute seventh. The whole point of the absolute seventh is that the rook is cutting off the attacking king from taking the opposition. If white's king were here, that would be an absolute seventh position. So this is just a trivial win. And if we're here, with the king not in opposition and black on the move, black is actually a very long way from mate. This is not a scary position for the defender at all because of the check here, and we now have a third rank defense on the board. The correct move for the attacker here is queen to c6, taking away one of the two central squares, at which point you want to have the rook on the opposite color from the king, and it can never be walked down because on that it comes here. Third rank defense is a separate topic.